Hey Googlers, it's Custom with Solutions 8, here with Frederick Valles. Frederick, thank you for being here. Appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kasim. Great to be on your show.
So Frederick is the co-founder and CEO of Optimizer, which I think is one of the premier, if not the premier, Google Ads management suite, right? Did I say that correctly? Is that the way you contextualize it?
Yeah, totally. We're like the premier. I mean, I love that sort of praise, but it's kind of hard to say who's the premier or this or that. But we did win a couple of awards. So at the US Search Awards, the Global Search Awards, Canada Search Awards, UK Search Awards, we had a clean sweep last year. And then this year we've already won the Canada Search Award, and then we got Global and US coming up again. So hope to continue that streak. And we first won it in 2015. So it's kind of nice to see that consistency. It's not just like a one-trick pony, but we keep up. And yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, what's the elevator pitch for those watching? If they've never heard of Optimizer before, well, how would you pitch it to somebody?
I mean, it's basically about saving time and doing your PPC management job more efficiently, more at scale, and just better through technology. And it's kind of interesting because Google has introduced so much automation, and yeah, right. And so to some PPC managers, it's like, well, why would I have a third-party tool that kind of does the same automation? And we don't think of ourselves as competing against Google. We think of ourselves as complementing Google's full range of capabilities. And so where Google is sort of trying to make every advertiser base level good or good enough that they're happy to continue investing in Google, what we're going for is those PPC experts, people who do it for a living, and they got to be better than average. And you need to have better than average to keep your clients happy. And how do we do that? How do we build complementary tools? How do we help you scale your agency business? So that's what's really all about.
That's awesome. So just a couple disclaimers for our listeners. We're not affiliates at all, but we are users. We signed up with Optimizer. And what I love about it is I'm not a huge fan of the set it and forget it automation. I don't think that the day that exists, I won't have a job. You know what I mean? Like people will just be able to take it and run with it. What's cool about Optimizer is it gives power back. So there's like, visibility into things that we wouldn't have necessarily had prior to. And you actually get more controls. And so instead of just, take it and run with it like a lot of tools do, and I'm not going to sit here and bash any of the other applications out there. It feels like it's another tool set. It's even more empowering. How did that land for you, Frederick? Do you hear that?
It totally landed. But it's funny, listen, for anyone building a business out there, this is one of the lessons that I learned in my years of doing Optimizer. So you start building a tool and a technology or whatever your solution may be, and you have limitations, right? Because your team is smaller, you just have fewer resources to do things. And so for us in the beginning, that meant that we couldn't build an end-to-end automation. So what we said is, well, we can at least analyze the data, present you with the findings, and then let you look through those, because we knew that our suggestions would not be 100% perfect. And that turned out to be actually a unique value proposition, like you just said, people fundamentally like having that control, like having that insight. And so even if now we give you 100% perfect suggestion, well, at least you still know what's being done. You approved it. You can go and talk to your client about the insights that you drew from it. And so at this stage, anyone in Optimizer can say, yeah, just set it and forget it. But we do like that whole notion of let's put together various pieces, right? Let's do the heavy lifting that gets to the data analysis. You look at it, and then you approve it, and then maybe another tool does the next thing with that, right? So keywords are separated from bids, from budgets, from negative placements, because you want to maintain that insight and kind of play the PPC strategist role with all of those insights.
Yeah, it sort of elevates you to the, now you're a general on the battlefield instead of just hopefully just out on the, in the trenches. Exactly. You touched on something that I'm really excited to talk to you about. How many accounts do y'all have? Do you mind me asking how many Google Ads accounts are hooked into Optimizer? You can give me a ballpark, or you can say, hey, dude, I'm not going to share this information with you.
I don't know what we say on the website, but we manage over 1.4 billion a year in spend.
Okay. So the amount of data you have is immense.
It's pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and so your ability to identify trends, changes, common denominators, see where Google's lying, where they're telling the truth. It exceeds most organizations, I would imagine.
Yes.
So that's I think what's cool about that too, is it puts you in a position to, even if you're 60 days ahead in this game, that can be absolutely huge. So how do you do that? How do you take all that data and then find the signal through the noise? That feels like a really daunting task.
Yeah, and so right now it's really about your accounts, right? So whatever accounts you link into Optimizer, we do the heavy lifting for you and present those insights. We do have a number of tools that look a little bit across the whole industry. And so we do vertical assignments. So we guess what vertical your account is in, and then you can tweak that if it's not the right thing. But that helps us do budget allocations, for example, and bid adjustments. So we can look and we can say, okay, well, for a typical automotive account, these are the levels of expensiveness by geographic region. And so do you fall below that, above that? Where do we need to bring you? And so that is based on more of a machine learning analysis that looks across all the data sets that we have and makes everyone better. But it is also tricky, right? Because I don't want to go in there and say, oh, well, we looked at Kasim's account and here's a bunch of keyword suggestions that made sense for him. And by the way, you seem to be a fairly similar industry. So why don't you go and take these same keywords? Because then we really would be doing a bit of a disservice to our clients, because there is that secret sauce and the hard work that you put in. We don't want to just take that and give it to everyone else.
Yeah, you want to protect the user's IP, but you also don't want to not use some of the aggregated data. And I think finding that line is important. And it sounds like you guys have found a pretty good line of demarcation. Benchmark specifically, that feels like a really, I can't imagine anybody fighting you on that. It's just good to know where we all land.
Yeah, exactly, because I mean, that's like the thing, right? You want to know, am I trending ahead or behind my competitors? And you make smart decisions based on that. The other thing that we've done, this is a study, it's about a year old now, but we looked at RSA behavior. So responsive search ads. And we saw that 75% of our clients have used it at some point. And of those 75%, something like less than 1% had stopped using them. And so there's this debate, are RSAs good or bad? And by looking at this data, I would say like most people have tried them, most people have kept them. So that either means they're working pretty well if you manage them okay, or advertisers are lazy and they enable them and they never look at them and they do the wrong thing, right? But I think it's the former. And those are the types of data we can look at too. And so we can help move the market a little bit in the direction of doing the right sorts of automation. But a lot of that is me talking to people like you and your audience and going out there and educating, because I think there is a lot of fear about how these automations work. And yes, in many cases, they have too much control and you can't just let them do their own thing. You have to monitor it. You have to stay on top of it. And things like bid management, right? You can turn on smart bidding and you can see horrendous results. But is that because machine learning doesn't work? Or is that because maybe you didn't meet some of the prerequisites for having good smart bidding performance?
Yeah, proper conversion tracking, transparent views. I totally understand.
Exactly. And so we understand it on this call because we're the experts, but then we work with, or you work with clients who don't get it at that level. And they're just like, hey, well, isn't this the magic bullet? And like, why am I paying an agency to do this bid management? It's like, well, there's still a lot of stuff that needs to feed in and a lot of work that needs to be done to get all the conditions right for this tool from Google to do a good job. And that's what we have to communicate to that end user who's paying, your bills and then by extension our bills.
Yeah,
it kind of keeps this whole ecosystem floating.
Well, there are some folks that I think would benefit from using Optimizer instead of an agency. Like I don't think that we're the magic bullet and everybody has to go hire an agency. I think that Google has built an ecosystem that honestly can stand alone in certain instances. Like specifically, I'm thinking like DSA, dynamic search ads, for a small localized business and somebody who's smart enough to kind of do a weekly management. That might be all they need. And then you take somebody who's a little more expansive, and if they just slap Optimizer on it so they can see a little bit more in the way of visibility, some better recommendations, maybe you don't need an agency at all. And I'm not afraid of that narrative. So many agencies are like, they're just building these high walls and digging moats around it, saying like, no, you absolutely have to have us. And in my mind, I'm like, that can't be true. Things are getting easier, more transparent, more automatable. Now, the really complex clients, those are the ones I want. That's our bread and butter. The folks that don't want to do it themselves. But I think that the tool that y'all have built, and it's not just the tool, it's also, like you said earlier, and I love that you're going this direction, the education. Telling people, like what you just said with responsive search ads, that's a phenomenal pro tip. That's a value bomb. Because we used to do 2 expanded text ads and 1 responsive search ad for every single campaign, every single ad group that we built. Yeah. And it took us forever to decide like, all right, responsive search ads are winning as a ubiquitous truth. We're going to default to this. If we had someone like you saying, hey, y'all, we have, however many billions of dollars in spend, this is what we're seeing with RSA. So where do we go to see the optimizer education? Like, do you do courses, blogs, videos? How do we connect more with?
Yeah, well, just like you, we're on YouTube. So we have what we call PPC Town Hall. You can go to ppctownhall.com. Every other Wednesday, we do a session kind of like this one, but 2 guests. And we just like talk about whatever topics top of mind. Recently, we did one on federated learning of content, or FLoC. We do about 1 a quarter about bidding, about automation. And it's really cool because we bring in these experts. And we actually brought this in when conferences stopped happening in person due to the pandemic. And that was a large part of my job. So I was like, what am I going to do now? So I started a live stream every other Wednesday. And it was just great because actually what we were doing, it's me having those hallway conversations with the other speakers, but you being able to listen in and like, hey, what's really on those guys' mind, right? So it goes beyond the slides and the presentations. And it's really been enjoyable. We've had a good audience, and that's a great way to keep up with the education. And then of course we have a blog, and every other week, so the weeks we don't do town hall, we have a Learn with Optimizer session. And that's where we dive more into, okay, how do these themes and topics connect to the tool set within Optimizer? Because PPC Town Hall is more about broad education. It's not about, hey, here's how Optimizer works. That's what we do on the off weeks.
That's awesome. So I'm going to link to PPC Town Hall in the description of this video for anybody listening. I appreciate you sharing that with me. You just said something that triggered me violently. So we're going to dig into that if you don't mind, which is FLoC. Like, I don't understand. And Frederick, maybe you'll be able to explain this to me, because I truly mean I don't understand. Like, I don't feel like I have a good handle on this. I've read all the white papers. I've been on GitHub. I've done deep. I don't get why we're not all farmers with pitchforks and torches out there, like, freaking out. I mean, Google's taking away our one-to-one data association. They're going to show us groups that are amalgamated based off of what Google decides is most important from a browsing behavior perspective. We're not going to get, like, I don't know how dynamic remarketing is going to work. I don't see how this isn't catastrophically damaging. Google says that they've been able to, in their testing, prove a 95% match, but they're dealing with high spends. My average client spends less than 10 grand a month. So talk me off the ledge or push me over it. Like, where are you as far as this is concerned?
Yeah, no, it's a complicated topic. And the other thing to acknowledge is this is still in the proposal phase and it's evolving quickly. And so if you go to the GitHub forums with your pitchfork, they are listening, right? They're like, okay, let's not do that then.
But it's further in the proposal stage, because they have, what is it, 0.5% of all Chrome browsers now, or Chrome users are FLoC'd. So they're
right
in, beyond.
Well, they're testing it, right? Yeah. And that's actually one of the good things. It's proposal, and you're right, it is actually proposals are being tested. But what I meant by being tested is that the way that the individual users are being assigned to cohorts, that hasn't been locked down. So they did it one way, and then, like you said, Google found 95% efficacy in terms of reproducing the same cost per conversion. Or was it conversions per impression? It was something that actually is a meaningful stat to advertisers.
Yeah, it was a relevant KPI, but the spends were in the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right. And I think that also then speaks to the fact that because it is 0.5% of the browsers doing this, you need to look at these bigger accounts to get statistically significant data.
That makes sense.
And as they open it up, like, we'll see where the data flows. But generally speaking, even if you have a small account, you're still going to benefit from the fact that there was a good mapping of what cohort a user falls into. Now, I think it's also important to kind of break this into 2 segments. So one of them is your audience targeting, where it is in fact going from knowing one person through a third-party cookie to a group of people who've done similar things. And that's going to be actually highly imprecise because, say that both of us share the interest of PPC, which is obvious, but you're really into cats. No, I'm going to be into cats. You're into dogs, right? So, but now
we did that right.
Okay, so there you go. So, but now both of us maybe fall into this cohort, which is largely dominated by PPC because that's the driving thing. But what about cat food versus dog food? How do you find people who might be interested in that? And obviously there's still the search keyword, right? So we're not losing search keywords, but audience targeting. Because now we're both in that same cohort. And that's the other thing some people misunderstand. And I know you understand this, but speaking to your audience for a second. So it's not like me as a user, I'm going to be in a cohort group about cats and a cohort group about PPC. No, me as one individual, I sit in one cohort that's based off of everything I've done. And that's the imprecision that comes in, because I'm going to be in the same cohort as you, even though we're very different individuals.
Right. Well, and that's actually one of the things that sort of scares me, is the fact that, and I've seen some contradictory language inside of GitHub with Google saying we're only going to put people in one cohort, but it might expand into multiple cohorts in the future, which here's my issue, is exactly what you just said. I think you nailed it. So I'm interested in, PPC, dogs, Vin Diesel movies, and my wife is pregnant, right? Well, in this little word cloud of interests, the ones that are secondary and ancillary end up being sort of subjugated to the primaries. And then Google says that you can move in and out of cohorts. Well, if I move out of cohorts, it doesn't mean that I've necessarily lost that interest, but I've, maybe another one just becomes more predominant. And so I think that this shift, and then the fact that they're seating in noise just infuriates me, but I understand it. But the shifting in and out, it makes me concerned for our ability to have a long enough timeline, in terms of like data acquisition, marketing to these prospects and users. I'm just not entirely sure that I see that working.
Right, and that's where the secondary piece then comes in. So you talked about dynamic remarketing and remarketing in general. So that is very funny, because remarketing is based on a first-party relationship, which is not at issue here, right? Once somebody comes to your website, you should be able to talk to them, because that is kind of your relationship. The problem is what facilitates you talking to those people as they navigate the web is the third-party cookie. So you have to share your relationship with your client to a bunch of other people, and that's not private. Now, the solution that Google has for that, Fledge and Turtle Dove, that's a little bit different. That actually is still a one-to-one, but the one-to-one relationship is actually hidden inside of the browser. So the browser doesn't have to tell the whole world about that relationship, but every time that person comes back to a site that says, and the site says, hey, I'm ready to serve an ad, what ad should I serve? It looks inside itself, inside the browser. It doesn't talk to an ad network, and it says, oh, actually, Optimizer said this user came to them and they want to show more ads to them. Boom, the ad gets shown. And so what's fascinating here is that you do lose some ability to be precise in the generic audience targeting, like interests in market, life event, those types of things. But once you have them, it becomes a first party thing. And now you actually do get to have that one-on-one conversation. So in your example, I think with your wife being pregnant, congratulations on that, by the way.
Oh, she's not. We're past that. But I was just, as an example, I don't like Vin Diesel movies either. I was just trying to come up with random.
Well, I have 3 kids, right? But so when you have that first kid and, she's 1 month pregnant, we're not really thinking about redoing or doing a baby room, right? But as you get closer to that, that becomes the dominant narrative of what you're looking for on the internet. And then you capture them, and then you start having that first party relationship. And then it's like, hey, that kid was born 18 years ago, and maybe we should show you some university, college loans, whatever it is, right? But and that's kind of the shift that we have to make. And I think we have to assume that finding an audience is just going to become harder. It's been incredibly easy because privacy has been really lax. So we have to think more about how do we take all that value that we have now as quickly as we can and shift it into first party relationships, because that's going to continue to work.
I had no idea that. So you just taught me Fledge and Turtle Dove. I'm going to have to go to school. I've heard Turtle Dove referenced, but I haven't done a deep dive. I didn't realize that there was already a documented answer to things like dynamic remarketing. So that's good for me to know. So maybe as a soundbite, do you think Flock's going to be better or worse for advertisers, specifically smaller advertisers? Let's say like sub 50 grand a month.
As a soundbite, I mean, I think Flock is going to be less precise, but it is better than nothing. And the alternative we face is Apple and Firefox, which basically said no more third-party cookies. Yeah. Right? Obviously, they're not vested players in the ad space, so they're fine doing this. But for us as advertisers, I am thankful that Google is actually seriously considering a solution. And whether Flock lives or dies, I really don't care. But I do care that something comes out of this that gives me an alternative to continue building these relationships while being sensitive of privacy.
That was a really good answer, Frederick. I feel like you should be a politician. And I didn't mean that as an insult. Like, that was like really well crafted to have, especially because I put you on the spot like a jerk. I shouldn't have done that, but I appreciate you coming back with it.
I was at Google a long time ago now. I think maybe we'll talk about that too. But one of the nice things about working for a big company like that is they give you press training. And so I was their AdWords evangelist for a long time.
No way.
And I'd work with the marketing team and the PR team. And I did live TV and like interviews. And yeah, people do put you on the spot. And so it's like, they got that messaging down, and that's still in there.
So let's talk about that. You were you were in the first 500 employees at Google. Do you know your employee number? Did they do that?
Yeah, so my badge number was 833, but they would give badges to temps and vendors. So at the time, it was roughly, you could divide that number by 2, and that'd be your actual full-time employee number. So I'm roughly 400-ish, 415.
That's so cool.
Full-time.
So you got to see, I mean, ground floor, the thing. And was it on a meteoric tear? Or like, what was it like when you got there?
Yeah, it was funny because I didn't really get Google. So I was doing consulting for Sapient. This was right after the dot-com bubble had burst. So I graduated in 2000, did a job at a consulting company for about 2 years until I got hit in the third wave of layoffs. And then looked at Google as like, yeah, it could be interesting, but I like, why do they only have a search box on the page? Like, there's something missing here. And then it dawned on me, like, man, these guys are actually really good at finding answers. And they had a really strong Stanford network, and I was at Stanford. And so I got roped in because they needed someone who spoke Dutch. And it felt like the right time. Like, there was enough buzz about it, but it wasn't something everybody knew about as like the next big thing. And it was just down the road from where I lived, and it needed my language skills and Stanford connection. So I was like, yeah, let me go and give it a shot. And glad it worked out. But that said, so I ended up basically joining the support organization. And through the support organization, did all the work with the Dutch language market, and eventually transitioned into product and PR, etc. But in the very early stages, I had an interview with this dude named Matt Cutts.
Oh yeah,
nobody knew who that
Matt
was.
Cutts. Sure,
yeah.
He was always
exactly. We all do.
He was the SEO guy who was lying to us all the time. I like Matt, but he would hop on and say, "Oh yeah, this is the truth," and all of us would be like, "No, it's definitely not."
Exactly, but like nobody knew who Matt was, and they were like, "Well, this guy Matt, he's building some sort of a team to help SEO." And he needs someone with a little bit of technical skill, and I have an engineering degree, so he's like, why don't you go talk to him, and maybe you'll do engineering instead of customer support. And I didn't really take it seriously, and Matt sits me down and he starts asking me these engineering problems, and I'm like, okay, I could probably do it, but I'm not that good as an engineer. So I basically flunked that interview. And then thinking back on that years later, after the stock has gone public and everything, I'm like, as an engineer, I would have had 1,000 times as much stock. Like, I would not be working anymore. So yeah, sort of a missed opportunity, but still worked out.
Yeah, well, it's a great story. So you didn't get the stock, but you got the story. Who's to say which is more valuable?
Exactly.
So how long were you with Google?
Just shy of 10 years.
Okay.
So
what's it like on the inside? Is it a meat grinder, or was it a fun place to work?
Oh, super fun. Yeah, no, I mean, all the stories about the perks. And so in the first year that I was there, I had to review ads. There was no automatic review of ads. So basically every Dutch ad that came in, there was only me to review it and approve it to go live or disapprove it. And I did all the email with all the Dutch customers because nobody else spoke Dutch. And so you're thinking maybe it'd be a meat grinder. And so there certainly was an expectation of, like, these ads came in today, they got to be reviewed today, because if they're not, they're just going to pile up and it's going to be bad. But you got your work done, and then at 4 o'clock, I'd go play hockey, street hockey with Larry and Sergey. Actually, Larry didn't play anymore, but Sergey, I played with Sergey.
Wait, we got to pause and back up.
The parking lot.
Oh, Larry and Sergey, you actually got to go play street hockey with them?
Yeah, Larry came to parties at my house, and we talked about whatever was on his mind that day.
Dude, no way! That is so cool.
With Sergey, I played hockey, and
what are they like?
So Sergey is very athletic. I never really got to connect with Sergey, I think, in the way that you would connect with Larry. So yeah, Sergey, I played hockey, and that was basically it. And I wasn't a very good hockey player, so maybe that's why that relationship never went any further.
Didn't make the cut.
I didn't make the cut. But Larry's just, I don't want to use it in a bad way, because like I'm nerdy and he's nerdy. And so we have these like really random topics that we care about. And so when he came to the party at my house one day, he was super into like air quality or something. And he brought these big machines that he bought, air quality monitors. And nowadays, everyone has these air quality monitor, small devices that sit in your house. It's very easy. But back in the day, like he had to do an industrial rental to figure out what were the volatile compounds in the air of wherever he was going. But it was just like he'd be on that sort of a track and thinking about that. And then we chit chat about the technology and why it was important. And just kind of like a fun engineering conversation to have. And both of them are super funny. So every Friday, there'll be a TGIF meeting, the whole company meeting. And the two of them and then Eric Schmidt would get up on stage and they would answer any question that anyone at the company had. And I just really appreciated like their sense of humor. A bit dry at times, but like funny guys, sharp, really quick-witted. So and as a company, like I couldn't really have asked for a better place to work. And I did leave because it did change a little bit. And it sort of depends on the organization that you're in. But yeah, when it was 60,000 people and I decided to leave, it was basically because I was the AdWords evangelist. And my strength and my skill and my contribution to the company was going out to events and getting up on stage and basically answering the tough questions like, why did Google make these changes to quality score, right? So the same questions that Matt Cutts would get, I'd get from the PPC perspective. But I'd stand up on stage and I'd explain like, this is why it's important. Like if we don't do this, then the ecosystem breaks and then it's bad for everyone, right? So let's get these bad players out. But I come back the next year, right? Because it's easy to go up on stage one year and say like, oh yeah, we'll fix this. Like I hear you. And then the next year you go back and it's like, actually, we haven't fixed anything. So I took it on to actually go back to the product teams and share that feedback and make sure that something good happened because of it. And so I think I did have an impact on the industry, on how advertisers understood the system. But then new leadership came in the sales organization, which I was technically reporting into. And they said, well, you got to scale what you're doing, right? So stay at the office, don't go to conferences, don't travel the world, like do all of this virtually. And we all understand like there's a human element. And I think one of the things that I brought was AdWords was not like a faceless name or a faceless product. Like right. Here was Fred representing AdWords and you knew you could go talk to Fred if you had issues with it. And then when they said he can't do that anymore, I was like, well, been here long enough, saved up enough money. Let me go and try something different.
Is that when you jumped over to Optimizer? Was that like the very next step for you?
Yeah, so Optimizer didn't exist. So I'm co-founder of it. So it was founded about a year and a half after. But yeah, I decided to start consulting. And in working with these customers, it's like, holy shit, like I thought I did a good job building a really easy to use ads product. But then when you're actually in the trenches doing this work, oh my God, there's so many things you still have to do manually that just don't make sense. So I quickly find myself out of time. I was speaking to my customers and I'd be doing that all day. And then in the evening, I was like, oh, wow, I've promised all these things that I'm going to do to their accounts. And like, I have no time. So I was looking for automation. And again, not to speak badly of the other tool vendors, but they were all very focused on cross-platform management. And I was like, I just care about AdWords because that's where 75% of the money is being spent. If I can make that 5% better, that's worth more than me doing the same thing across, Microsoft and whoever else was out there at the time. And then they were super expensive. Like me as a consultant, I couldn't afford. They were like, give me 5% of your ad spend. I was like, well, my client pays me 10. Right. I give you half of my revenue. Like that makes no sense. But then I started building scripts, and thanks to those scripts, we were able to automate a bit.
Man, that is so cool. So and I won't overstate this, and I know you'll reel me back in, but you helped build Google Ads. I mean, yeah, that I had no idea.
I'm not going to be shy about it. Yeah, I mean, so some of the things I was involved in. So I joined Google before conversion tracking existed, before search query reports existed.
I didn't know that conversion tracking ever did not exist. That's insane to me to hear.
It is, right?
So it was just batch and blast. I hope this works. There's no way to tell.
And it was much better than what existed at the time. It was at least you get to pick the keyword, you get to set the bid and control the budget. And at the bottom line of the business, you sort of know, well, at least you could justify your expense through the clicks that you got. What happened to those clicks afterwards? Hey, that was up to you. Analytics wasn't a common thing. Most analytics that was out there was installed on your server and would do a logs analysis on a nightly basis, and then you get some reports out of it. Okay, so all three of those things, I then helped create for everyone. So the first one was I was an affiliate. So I was working at Google, right? And I'm starting to find out that these affiliates are making massive amounts of money using Google Ads. And I'm like, whoa, that's interesting. Let me try to understand this. And what better way to understand it than to play the game? So I started playing the game. I became the biggest eBay affiliate in the Netherlands. And I was a fairly sizable affiliate for a bunch of other companies in the United States. But it was like, yeah, now I'm spending all this money and I really don't know which of my keywords are working. And to understand that, I need to build conversion tracking and I need to build a search query report. Back in the day, you could just put the query in the URL string, so you could grab it out. And you could do all these redirects. So I built a redirect system and with my own cookies and conversion tracking. And then like the Google team was like, yeah, that makes sense. Like people need to measure things. So, and then I got involved on the product side. So there were product managers building these capabilities, but they talked to me because I built them myself for my own advertising business. And so I was able to give inputs in what do you need? How does it need to work? Like what data needs to come out of it? What are the actions somebody might want to take from this? And then we still didn't have analytics, but my friend and product manager, Wesley Chan, he had gone to a conference and he'd met this group of guys out of San Diego called Urchin. And they were doing some, like really one of the first to decently built online analytics. So analytics in the cloud, basically. Nobody was doing that. And him and I, we flew down, we went and talked to them, and we decided it'd be a good company to buy. And so Wesley convinced Eric that this was like a big deal and we needed the money to buy these guys. I helped figure out how we do the support, how we'd integrate like basically the support in the sales teams. And then the rest is history. So that's Google Analytics.
Dude, no way.
Urchin.
So I'm on a Zoom call right now with like a legit digital celebrity. You're the conversion tracking is like your brainchild. That's so cool to hear. That's awesome, man. Good for you.
Well, I'm glad I'm impressed with you.
Yeah, I had no idea. It makes me rethink everything, to be honest with you. I'm very cautious when I see recommendations from, my course is called You versus Google. Because I don't think when Google shows up with the recommended tab, I always tell my customers and my students, very rarely does that end up. I'll give you an example with geographic targeting, and I'd be really interested in you challenging me on this. Google loves the people in or interested in selection. It says recommended in brackets. We had the highest performing real estate investment campaign on the planet for 7 years. I can prove that with data. We beat out the big guys, Cody Sperber, Sean Terry, Grant Cardone, like all of them. And one of the things that we changed, among many, but one of the things was making sure that we were focused geographically. And when we expanded and allowed Google to play that little recommended game, we got irrelevant leads from irrelevant geographies. And that's one example of many. So anytime a machine tells me how to optimize the campaigns, I'm always thinking to myself, like, I just don't. And I think that's why we got so good. If you don't mind me being mildly arrogant, as an agency, we've reached a pinnacle, I think. And it's because we just question everything. And a lot of that's my business partner, who's our chief strategist. So when I see the optimizer recommendations, we don't take those wholesale ever. It's dig into the why, what's going on, does this make sense, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But knowing that I'm on a call with the dude that invented conversion tracking, like the fact that you had to have built Optimizer with your insider knowledge of the way that Google Ads works. And so instead of, an overlay and just maybe trying to mildly interpret it, like you just have so much more structural knowledge than anybody could ever have if they approached it without that. And that, to me, that's really exciting and that's impressive. And I'm not trying to make this an Optimizer sales pitch, by the way. So if you're listening and you're hearing that, I'm not an affiliate. Buy it or don't, I don't give a shit. I know Frederick does, but it's cool to know your background because that changes the value proposition for me immensely.
Yeah. Thank you. And I mean, I'm totally with you. No matter where the recommendation comes from, you have to understand it, right? And so I wrote this book here. So quick plug for the book, but digital marketing in an AI world. And one of the things that I harp on, or not harp on, but it's like one of the sections in the book is that I am scared when the PPC manager of today loses sight of the fundamentals, right? So as more and more things become automated, there is a tendency perhaps to just take those recommendations and implement them without understanding what drove those suggestions. But so one of the things we would do in Optimizer is we generally not recommend adding something as a keyword if we knew that it had bad quality score, because yes, you could get more sales by adding that keyword, but really you should fix your quality score issues first, because that's going to make sure that the cost is reasonable for those new things that you add. And it's little things like that, like how is everything interconnected, that you really truly do need to understand, right? So even if you're going to do smart bidding with a TROAS target, well, how is a TROAS derived from your conversion data and your value per impression? Understand that, because if you don't understand it, then it's all gobbledygook, and you're just going to accept things that are not going to be leading to the best performance for you. So what you're saying makes total sense. Take really tight controls, beat everyone else, and then start to expand into like those next levels, but with super tight controls, and understand what you're buying and how what you're buying is no longer as closely related. So maybe it needs a slightly different messaging, maybe it needs a different bid, maybe you budget differently, right? So, but all of those things come back into play to make you the master PPC player that you are.
That was really well said. I've taken a lot of your time here. I have one more question, if you don't mind. It's the one I'm most excited to hear the answer of. It's also the most annoying.
Uh-oh.
Where's it going? Where's Google Ads going? What do you see on the horizon that the rest of us that don't have your insight and your experience, like what pro tips can you offer us? You know, pull out your crystal ball.
Yeah, so I mean, I fundamentally believe that Google does care about control for advertisers, but I think they're fighting it from two angles, right? So they grow their business by having more advertisers in the ecosystem, and that only happens when you make it super easy. Now, a little bit of the problem that AdWords has always had is that early on we made a decision it was going to be one product, and that one product had to serve everyone, whether you were a newbie, a PPC expert spending $500 million a year on ads. Yes, people do spend $500 million a year on ads. We're spending $10 a month on ads, right? So, and that makes it very complicated to have this great system. And so that's why where we're seeing all the automation. But then on the high end spenders, on the PPC expert side, they do want controls and they do want insights. And so I think it's going to be a long time before Google takes those controls away. So in my crystal ball, I think the future is actually bright. I'm happy that Google's investing billions of dollars in machine learning and smart bidding, because listen, I cannot do bidding better. And I have Optimizer, right? We have a ton of data, but I fundamentally believe we will not do better bid management than Google can. But what we can do as PPC experts, as a management platform, is we can help you bring in your business data. What are your true goals? Too many people say they have a goal, but that's not really their goal, right? Is your goal to get leads? No, your goal is to get good leads that lead to sales. Communicate that, and that's not easy. That needs to be done. Right, and so it's all these things that we can bring in. So I think for me, the PPC future is bright, but I think we're going to have to work hard, right? We cannot assume anything's going to be static. We're going to be having to adapt to what we do on an annual basis, but that's also what makes it exciting. But if you're ready to like sit back, relax, kind of like semi-retired, then PPC is probably not for you.
Probably not the game for you. Yeah, I had a student ask me whether or not he should get in the PPC game. And he asked it, he goes, you know, if you could do it all over again. And 10 years ago, the answer is like, hell yeah. But now it's so saturated, so competitive, so and tumultuous. So I think if you're going to get in it, I'm not trying to discourage anybody, but if you're going to get into it, it's exactly what Frederick just said. Like, you got to roll up your sleeves and be willing to do the work.
And if you're going to get into it, like a piece of advice, right? So you either work with really small clients, but the game is education, like, because they don't really understand what they need to do. Small clients tend to be extremely needy, right? And they're needy in a way, like they ask you things that just don't make sense. And it's not because they're bad people, it's just because they don't understand it, they don't have time to get to that point of understanding. So how do you take something super complex like Google Ads and dumb it down to the level that someone needs to make good, smart decisions? Like, that's one level of the game. So it's about people management. The other side of the game, which I think you're much more in, is, okay, we got these companies that have amazing data that goes way beyond what Google might be looking at in their machine learning. So how do we do something that brings to bear their insights on the Google Ad system, and how does that make it better? And I find those projects super exciting too. It's about unique data. It's about insights. It's about then taking those insights in a way that you can connect them to the settings and the dials in Google Ads, because you might have a great insight, but there's nothing you can do with it because, like, we're looking at app campaigns. There's so little data coming out of app campaigns that, yeah, we could know that there's some wasted spend on certain placements. But can we make them negative? And actually, you can put them as account level negative placement, so you can do something. But again, it's like your first instinct might be like, well, there's no campaign level negative, so we're stuck. But it's about knowing that nuance, right? Like really getting into the weeds. But it's much more complicated. It takes much more of your time, but it tends to be much more fun and fulfilling in a way.
Yeah, that's, man, that press training did you a lot of good, Frederick. Like I could just sit here and listen to you chat. I want to give you the last word so you don't feel like you've been bulldozed. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that I should have, or anything you want to talk about that our listeners need to hear?
Oh man, I think I bulldozed you, if anything. But yeah, no, I mean, I think, listen, PPC is an exciting game. Don't be scared of all the automation that's coming. And going back to the Google Analytics thing for a second, right? So Hal Very, Google's chief economist, he talked about when Google Analytics was purchased, everyone in the analytics industry was shaking in their boots, thinking they were going to go out of business. And Hal Varian said, complement, don't compete against something that's going to be like plentiful and easy to access. And when Google bought Urchin and made it analytics, it was free, it was easy to access, right? But all those players who complemented it did really well. And look at the analytics space today. Like, how many people listening on this call as PPC experts, you probably make some money from being really good with Google Analytics, right? When Urchin was bought, people did not think this was going to happen, but it actually became a huge industry. And I think the same is going to continue with ads. This is a growing industry, but you just got to position yourself in a complementary position as opposed to competing against the engines. So I'm super excited about that. I also think people need to look at the up and coming ad platforms. Amazon growing super quick, very similar to Google Ads, so very easy to learn. Apple Ads, probably we're going to see that in the next couple of years. Right now, Apple Ads works for the App Store, but I wouldn't be surprised if they actually introduced more of a search engine or a search product. So just be ready to look at all of these things and keep learning and have fun with it.
So, Frederick, I'm so grateful for your time. Thank you for coming on and
yeah, it's my pleasure, Cassie.
Yeah, teaching us.
Thanks for having me.
Watching this, I'll drop a link to Optimizer in the description. Check it out. I can tell you that the head of our specialist team, Santos, looked at every single product, top to bottom. And I'm sure, I think we were a nightmare with y'all because we were asking, I saw the email string once, it was like 1 billion questions and going back and forth. So we did our due diligence. Not to say that, you shouldn't look at everything out there, but we're pretty impressed with what y'all had. So thank you for that too.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thank you for being a user and saying all those kind of things. And honestly, like me and my two co-founders, we built it, but we got that amazing support team that just day in, day out answers all those questions. And, it's software, so it has bugs. Every software has bugs. It's just about how quickly you address it and, be good to your customers because you guys make what we do possible.
Yeah, we all are doing that. So we're grateful for you. And if you're watching, thanks for watching. I shoot a video every single day. Like, comment, subscribe. I like having guests on. So if there's somebody you want to hear from, reach out to me. We're sort of in a spot to where we can start getting them now, as evidenced by Frederick here. So Frederick, thanks for being here. And
this was fun.
We'll see y'all next time.
Bye.